France, one of the clear favorites to fight for the medals in the World Cup that has just begun, has been eliminated with one game left to play in the group stage. But beyond the surprising defeat against Latvia, the opening day loss to Canada was a setback from which they could not recover. But what did Jordi Fernandez do to make their superiority so absolute? The truth is that France started the game very solidly, partly thanks to Nando De Colo, who managed to break the ice with 4 quick points, while Canada was still adjusting its defense. In addition, Fournier managed to score his first 3-point shot attempt, which got his confidence off to a great start, a factor that, as we will see, extended throughout the first half. But Dylan Brooks managed to start Canada's offense with 2 dunks, one of them after a great defensive action. At that point of the game, the Canadian team started to show part of its defensive strategy. Fernandez knew that France was going to use Rudy Gobert as an important element in ball movement, moving him away from the rim to generate space in the paint. And Canada took advantage of this by putting a lot of pressure on the Frenchman's dribble, which allowed them to get new possessions and complicate the offensive system of Calais' team. It was also Dwight Powell's time to shine, who got a basket and a great assist to Kelly Olynyk that put them ahead for the first time in the game. Olynyk also scored a 3-pointer shortly after. Canada kept trying to get out in transition thanks to their speed and defensive versatility. But France kept doing a good job on the defensive balance. Batum made an impressive block on Dort in what continued to be an inefficient game from both teams. In addition, the perimeter players of the North American team started to defend screens from the weak side, forcing the French perimeter players to use their weak hand, and using the fact that Olynyk and Dwight Powell are players more than capable of switching on any screen without allowing a mismatch. But despite that factor, Fournier continued to be a constant threat who was also able to both find Gobert with ease and find space to score himself. And the combination of these players also playing away from the rim created space for others like Matthias Lesort, who got easy baskets at the end of the first quarter and the beginning of the second. France was doing a decent job on offense, but very good on defense, and Canada was not able to generate offensive advantages. Shea had failed to get into the game as expected, partly because of France's good defensive actions. But the defensive strategy of always offering the weak side was still Canada's priority, especially with players like De Colo, Okobo, or Fournier, capable of producing from the pick and roll, as we saw in the video analysis of the French team. But Evan was still completely plugged in, and Canada did not finish adjusting correctly in some situations that led to open shots for the French star. But off the dribble, the New York Knicks shooting guard was still able to score, even with Dort as his main defender. These issues caused France to continue to carburize during the first half of the second quarter. However, Olynyk started a 7-0 run for Canada, which eventually tied the game at 28 points. In addition, France was finding it increasingly difficult to circulate the ball on offense because of the large size and wingspan of the Canadian players. This led to turnovers that allowed the team to get out in transition easily and get fast break points, which also gave confidence to the star of the team, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But still, the incredible scoring ability of Evan Fournier allowed a France lacking creativity to stay in the game. Fournier scored 19 points on 7 out of 13 shooting from the field in the first half, but his team was still down by 3 points at the break. But the third quarter was an absolute demonstration of Canada's defensive prowess, which also began to click on offense. Shea also went to work to increase the difference with actions from the dribble, which even with good defensive actions like this block by Nico Batum lacked the necessary intensity to get the ball back. Canada continued to defend with the same intensity and strategy, but Fournier's creativity was fading as the minutes went by. But the first half of the third quarter was still a spectacular display from the player who has made All-NBA first team this season. The body language of the French players already indicated fatigue and desperation, committing meaningless turnovers forced by the ability of Olynyk and Powell to, as we said before, defend perimeter players. And despite some concrete actions like this triple by Nando De Colo, France had no chance to keep up with the competitive pace of the game. Shea was still having an incredible third quarter, taking advantage of his physical power even from the low post, coupled with the fact that France's defensive effort was practically non-existent, arriving late to the assists and allowing open shots. This pushed the Canadian team's lead to 20 points at the end of the third quarter, completely breaking the game. France tried to come out strong in the final quarter to get back into the game, adding more intensity to the game during the first few actions of the game. But Canada was again finding easy baskets in the paint without needing much ball movement. After scoring only 8 points during the third period, productivity remained very low for Calais' team as their defensive effort fizzled out. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who had already scored 2 three-pointers in the game, was still shooting wide-open three-pointers, while other players like RJ Barrett, who had an overall terrible performance during the game, joined the outside shooting party at times. But at that point, the game was completely sealed, and the French players simply wanted the game clock to reach 0 so they could prepare for the game against Latvia. The bad news for them is that they did not recover in time. It may have been because of chemistry, strategy, and approach problems, or simply because they ran headlong into reality. But France has been left out of the World Cup in the first group round, in a new failure of the federation to compete at international level, having one of the most talented groups of players in the world. Counting the defeat in the last preparation game against Australia, the 88-86 loss to Latvia is the third in a row. And if we go back in time, of all the disappointments of the French national team in the World Basketball Championships, this was undoubtedly the worst. The truth is that the team had won 2 consecutive bronze medals in the 2014 and 2019 editions, and this result has been a cold water that could certainly lead to a reconstruction of the whole national team. The generation of players like Nico Batum, Nando De Colo, Evan Fournier, or the absent Thomas Hurtel is reaching the twilight of their career. And this may be the time to bet on the next generation, as other teams like Spain have been doing. The good news is that France has at its disposal probably the best prospect in the world today, Victor Wembanyama, who, despite not being able to play this World Cup, should be the cornerstone of the federation for the future in the short, medium, and long term. For its part, Canada is in a very sweet moment. All the experts expected this group of players to be able to compete at a very good level, but the victory against France on the opening day has given them the confidence to believe it. We have to go back in time to 1994 to see Canada finish in the top 10 at a World Cup, where they managed a 7th-place finish in the edition they hosted. In fact, their best ever finish came in the 1978 and 1982 editions, the golden era of Canadian basketball, when they managed a 6th-place finish. But despite the absence of Jamal Murray, the team has a very solid squad made up of very young players thanks to the professionalization of the country's development cycles. A team that is here to stay and that, on the defensive side of the court, is probably the strongest team in the tournament. They not only managed to beat France by 30 points on the first day, but also destroyed the weak Lebanon team by 128 points to 73. A margin of victory of 85 points in only 2 games. And we are talking about FIBA basketball and 40-minute games. Luguentz Dort and Dylan Brooks are top NBA defensive specialists, who also have the size to defend different positions. And Powell and Olynyk offer versatility and answers to any type of offensive system. There is still a lot of tournament left, but it would really be surprising if the Jordi Fernandez coached group is not able to achieve its best ever finish when the World Cup ends on September 10th.